Somewhere her she's gonna send, but you can say here if you want.
Oh, it's okay. I can.
We're just gonna.
Gemma, you can stay near you. Okay.
She, I told her that by near your jeans.
You have you posted. Yeah, I'm going to check that in the chat.
If anyone's watching you too.
There's Daddy.
I can hear
That's
you.
my dad.
Right, yeah, that's true.
I'm sure that once these lights turn on. Yeah, I can hear you.
I guess if you want, but it'd be nice to be south, I think. This is nice. Mama, is this your dad's pencil?
Yeah.
This is so cool. Yeah, this is like velvet. This is so special. You switch with me. You sit there. My blood. I'm so glad. Mom, I don't care what this is.
Vikings.
I want to
If I have to tell you guys three words from Gemma, we are here and there's a lot of other people here that are here again in contact. Small drink.
I don't think that. You're a good man. Go sit down next to Shindig's eating and going. Yeah.
What's your name again? Danny?
Oh.
You were at Easter.
Oops.
Madness.
Well, I know people who can get that part each other out.
Nice to meet you too.
Welcome to the College Conservatory of Music. Ohio state law requires that we notify our audiences of all available exits in case of an emergency. Please take time to observe all marked exits now. The consumption of food or drink and the use of cameras or recording devices is prohibited. We also ask that you silence cell phones and other electronic devices at this time. Thank you for your attention. The performance will begin shortly.
Good evening. Thank you all for coming to my lecture recital. I wanted to, thank you all for coming. This has been about a year in the making of studying about Piazzolla and his music and taking tango lessons and doing a lot of wonderful things to try to understand more about this art. And I'm very excited to share it with you today. I'm going to be talking, for those who don't know how a lecture recital works, I'll talk for about 30 minutes about my findings, about the performance, and then I'll perform these pieces for about 30 minutes with some very special guests, if you might have noticed. Tango is a sad thought to be danced, a guide for violin interpretation and performance of Astor Piazzolla's 6 tango etudes for solo violin in the tango style. So, to introduce, Piazzolla wrote 6 tango etudes near the end of his life, and they are designed for solo flute or solo violin. And when I first discovered them, I was surprised at the lack of resources. There isn't very many resources about how to perform them or what they're supposed to sound like. There's very few recordings even of them. And it got me curious, so I began to research about why there's this lack of resource for violinists. As far as I could tell, in my research, I found 3 main reasons. The etudes are mainly arrangements set for flute that Piazzolla wrote. They're not originally written for violin, but Piazzolla did intend for them to be both for flute or violin from the very beginning. This is kind of evidenced by the fact that there's awkward fingerings. They're technically not set well for the violin. There's many violin techniques that are missing that could have been used. But from the very beginning, Piazzolla referenced his inspiration from the Bach solo sonatas, which are sonatas and partitas, which are pieces for solo violin. And so from the very beginning, there's evidence that he was intending them to be for the violin as well as the flute. Another reason I found was the score is contradictory or ambiguous at times. For example, of the 6 etudes that I'll be performing tonight, 5 of them have very normal titles, such as anxious or mournful, things like that, descriptive words. But number 5 has absolutely nothing at all. And to make it worse, a lot of these etudes, when they have contradictory markings. When one part plays, if it's repeated, it's written in a different way, and it seems to be confusing or ambiguous. However, this is more of just the style of the tango composition style. Tango was an oral tradition, a hearing tradition, up until the 1930s when it really began to expand into a larger orchestra or larger ensembles. When it began to need larger ensembles, the necessity for sheet music began to arise, of course. But even then, the sheet music was not used as kind of the end-all, be-all. Instead, it was used more as a guide to allow musicians to interpret or to build their own style and to make their own voice. You'll see some of this later on as we continue talking about how we continue to analyze it. The last reason I saw why these aren't as popular as they should be is because there's so many pieces for solo violin. Solo violin has been a major composing point for a lot of composers. Telemann wrote pieces for solo violin. Bach wrote pieces for solo violin. Even today, we see Paganini and modern composers writing things for solo violin. It's a very popular genre. So what place does Piazzolla's tango etudes, of all things, their exercises, have in this enormous repertoire? And this is what I would like to address today in my document, in my lecture. I believe that the tango etudes have a very special place because it does something that no other classical solo piece for solo violin does. It allows the musician to have an enormous amount of freedom to develop one's voice, both in extended technique and in style, in rubato, in a lot of different ways. So this is very important for the violin repertoire. That being said, it is not jazz. It is not a way to just do anything and change anything. There's a funny story of Piazzolla where a violinist was once playing one of his pieces. He burst into, a violinist was playing one of his pieces for a recording session. Piazzolla burst into the recording studio and said, "How dare you change my music? Don't you dare do that. I'll kill you if you do." So there was clearly things that were off limits of the tango style. And so that's another element I want to discuss is how do we avoid murder by tango artists? So I describe it as somewhere in between classical music, where we're very strict with the score, what did the composer intend, and jazz, where the improvisation is completely free. And so we're going to discuss that. My thesis for this goes as follows. The purpose of this lecture recital is to provide the classical audience with an arsenal of violin techniques and suggestions to use in performing Astor Piazzolla's 6 tango etudes, thereby fostering individuality in interpreting Piazzolla's works faithfully within the tango tradition, encouraging a wider possibility in performance. So just briefly, I'd like to talk about the history of tango, the history of Piazzolla, talk about some of the resources that are available to musicians who want to explore this genre. And then I'm going to get into the meat of the lecture recital, which is kind of my favorite part. How do we interpret it? How do we analyze this piece? So first off, a brief history of tango. I apologize, first of all, to some of my tango friends here. I'm going to grossly simplify this, and I'm sure that I'll brush over some spots that you think are important, but for sake of time, I need to move on. So I apologize in advance. So tango, as far as we can tell, because it began in the slums. It was a peasant dance of sorts. It began in approximately the 1870s, the 1900s, about the turn of the century, when there was a huge influx of immigrants into Argentina. This made an interesting situation where there was a lot of poverty, there was a lot of difficulty, there was a lot of hardship. And so, of course, when there's difficulty, art flourishes. And so tango was kind of a way to express this frustration or this melancholy almost. Ironically enough, the upper class detested anything to do with tango. They thought it was a prostitute dance. There's debates whether or not that's really true, but for most part, they confined it to the peasantry and said, this is not for our upper class, this is not what Argentina is about. It was confined to brothels and to the streets. When we move on to the turn of the century, the 1900 to about 1930, we get what's called the Guardia Vieja, or the Old Guard. This is kind of the beginnings of the history or the power of tango. Ironically, it began when tango moved to Paris, France. When it moved to France, it was seen as the new hot thing that is happening from across the sea. It's the new romantic dance to express your love to someone. And because it was popular in Paris, ironically, the upper class in Argentina saw that and began to accept it as their own. And so we see that the upper class start to embrace their Argentine heritage. Popularity around the world grew in the US and especially Western Europe. The music changed though. It was slower, sadder, not meant to be danced to necessarily, but more to reminisce and more to remember. Excuse me. The golden age kind of occurred in the 1930s or so. Where these dates are exact is a little bit foggy, but the golden age of at least dance tango began about the 1920s and 1930s and extended on through about the 40s or 50s. The dance became popular again. Famous musicians began to make careers out of tango. It was no longer just a hobby. It was something that you could actually make real money with. And so we start seeing these large orchestras start to come together and create tango music that we now know and love. One of the great tango artists that were influential, his name is Carlos Gardel, and we'll see his name again in Piazzolla's history. And then we arrive to what we call Tango Nuevo, which is new tango. And there's still debate as to whether or not this is true tango. There's still this argument of whether or not it's danceable or not. That's another argument we'll talk about in a bit. But tango started to be fused with things, with jazz, with atonality, with music that was not originally from Argentina. We see the major mover of this was Astor Piazzolla himself. So that brings us to some context about Piazzolla. He was born in 1921, moved to New York. Sorry, excuse me. He was born in 1921 in Argentina, but moved to New York by the age of 4 and grew up in the New York area. He grew up in the Tango community, but he also had exposure to klezmer, Jewish music, and jazz and atonality. And he had big ambitions to become a composer. His first instrument was a tango instrument, the bandoneon, but he continued to pursue this idea of being a classical composer. Everything changed though when he went to Paris to study with a very famous composer named Nadia Boulanger. There's a really charming story that he writes in his history, in his memoir, where he shows Boulanger one piece and she says, no, it's not right. He shows another and so she says, no, it's not right. And he shows every piece he's ever composed and she says, no, it's not quite you. I don't understand. What else do you have? And he said he thought he would be thrown out the window if he showed tango music to Nadia Boulanger, the great composer. But he reluctantly said, well, I have one more piece, and played a tango piece. He said he didn't get through 5 bars before she stopped him and said, this is your calling. You need to write tango music. And from then on, he went back to Argentina, formed a band, and began to write thousands of tango tunes that we still play and love today. Tango Etudes, these etudes that he wrote, was published in 1987 at the height of his performing and recording career. Ironically, though, it was written 5 years before his death. He had a stroke in 1990 and passed away in 1992. So in some ways, I do believe the Tango Etudes are his memorial, the summary of his life and his tradition. Just briefly, I wanted to talk about what resources are available for those who want to study violin, the Tango Etudes and things like that. Most resources are for flutes, which are good, and they have some very important things, especially when taking an analytical approach. But there are some very key elements missing. For example, there's not a lot written about how to play tango violin. What does that look like? What does that sound like? And you'll hear some of those elements in just a little bit. There are some, of course, wonderful biographies by him. Natalia Gorin's Astor Piazzolla's memoir has some wonderful quotes from him, including, of course, some of these wonderful, charming stories about Nadia Boulanger and him yelling at the violinist in the recording studio. There's another by Assi and Collier, Le Grand Tango, which goes into more detail and even takes accounts from his friends and colleagues. Unfortunately, the tango tradition is not a well-documented tradition. That's kind of its charm. It's seen as kind of a very loose and personal tradition. Because of that, we have a lot of second-hand accounts, and it makes it a really interesting picture. As far as how to play tango violin, there are many resources online, although no one's done any significant research to kind of codify everything, partly because it's a living tradition and it constantly changes. But the violin was valued for its ability to play things non-musically, percussively, or to make sound effects that other instruments couldn't. It's kind of hard to sound like a drum on a flute. So the violin had some of those abilities to make extra noises that give tango that extra flair. Now for 4 different approaches to discuss these Piazzolla Tango Etudes. I want to discuss an analytical approach, a historic inspiration approach, an interpretive violin technique approach, and then a collaborative approach, and one by one. First of all, an analytical approach. This is fairly simple for anyone who's studied music for any amount of time. When you look at a piece, you want to analyze it. You want to see what the patterns are, what the figures are that are very common. The most significant one that you'll hear in this is what's called the tresillo. It's a combination of 3-3-2. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Piazzolla was known for this tresillo effect. It kind of gives it this drag speed up effect that gives tango a very nice kind of momentum. He extends this even further by going, by doing what I call a double trisio, where it's 3-3-3, 2-2, 1-2-3, 1-2-3, 1-2-3, 1-2-3, 1-2, 1-2, 1-2-3, 1-2-3, so on and so forth. So it sounds like we're in a different meter, but then all of a sudden it changes. He does this quite a bit. Most of the etudes are what we are ternary form, which means basically that the beginning and the end go the same, and the middle has something in between. My Suzuki friends out there will know this as the cheese sandwich, where we have something in the beginning, something in the middle, and something at the end. Not all of them are built this way. Some are more thematic. Some have a theme that keeps returning and develops and changes. But by and large, he likes this system, which is kind of which is very typical of this title, this kind of music. Etudes, these exercise pieces, are often built in ternary form so that the material returns at the end. Moving on to a historical inspiration approach. This is a fancy name for listening to recordings and finding out how they sound. This is very common in tango music. In working with a pair of wonderful dancers, it was a very interesting way to talk to them and not be able to say, here's the sheet music, read it, and tell me what you think. Instead, it was more of a conversation of, let me record something for you, you listen to it for a week, and we'll discuss what you've heard. And this is kind of something we can do with these tango etudes as well. They've been, of course, recorded by many people. Gideon Kramer and Rachel Barton Pine recorded these, and they're wonderful, wonderful examples. But if you want to go even deeper, you need to listen to true tango music. Now, what constitutes true tango music? That's up for debate. But I think the best example I can call upon is Carlos Gardel. Carlos Gardel was Piazzolla's mentor. When he was younger, he worked for Carlos Gardel and wrote tangos for him and played in his band, and so had a heavy influence from him. So this man, Carlos Gardel, is very, very important to Piazzolla's style and voice. There are other musicians as well, but that is the most important, I have found. I'm going to have to put this microphone down for just a little bit because I want to talk about interpretive violin techniques. This is basically where we start breaking the rules of classical music. When I only have 5 seconds to describe tango to people, I kind of describe it as a little bit dirty. It's not as refined as Mozart or Beethoven or Brahms. Instead, it's got a little bit of grit, it's got a little bit of romance. And because of that, we get some new techniques that are very interesting. So if you'll excuse me for a minute, I'm going to grab my own. I found as many as 14 different techniques that are unique to tango. I'm going to only describe a few of them because of time constraints, and because I wasn't able to incorporate all of them into these etudes, at least not in one performance. So I'll show a couple. The first of all is glissandi, or glissando, which is the sliding of the violin. These are very hard to do on flute, so of course Piazzolla didn't write many of them within these tango etudes since they're designed as flute. But I believe they do have a place. There's even ones that are very specific to tango, such as latigo, which is called the whip. And then the sirena, which is the siren. And this is one that Piazzolla himself actually invented. That one's fairly common at the end, where the piece continues to slow down. Important also is something called rastres. This is a very difficult thing to describe. In all my research, it's very hard to kind of solidify what is a rastres. But as far as I can tell, it's a sort of rubato. It's moving forward and moving away in the music. It's especially common on like the upbeats, which is within bass lines. so you'll hear a little bit of that too. Just as a note about the violin, how wonderful the violin is, I am biased. We can also do something called harmonics, which are a more ethereal effect. It's kind of hard to describe without getting too scientific, so I'll just show you. Piazzolla likes to write imagery, which I think the harmonic does very, very well to add that extra bit of spark. The last two things are double stops and pizzicato. These are elements that are more percussive. Double stops are playing multiple strings at the same time. Again, this is something that is unique to violin. And then pizzicato, there's, of course, the traditional pizzicato that violinists do, but Tango adds a couple of extra things. Two that I want to point out is just one. The tambur, which is the drum. This is a kind of pizzicato that has no tone, has no note. It's a little bit complicated to do, but it's supposed to sound more like the beat of a drum. Last of all, I wanted to talk about my collaborative approach to analyzing these pieces. I want to first introduce the two dancers that were so kind to offer their time and expertise to this, Anna Marie Giardini and Tony Seta. They've been very kind. As part of this research, my wife and I decided to have some fun as well as do some research by going and taking Tango classes at the Tango de Barrio. And they were so wonderful and kind and warm. And when I approached one of the people there with this idea, she was very, very helpful and kind and got me in contact with Tony and Maria. Now, I have heard from many, many people that Piazzolla is not danceable. And I got curious why. Why is this the case? Is there any way that we can? And in working with Anna Maria and Tony, I found most of the reason is speed. Tango is not a fast dance. It's not aggressive. Instead, it's romantic, it's intimate, it's close, and it's slow. Within our lessons, within my wife's and I lessons, we found that as well. That it's a very close dance, something to slow down and to reflect on life, not to speed up and to excite. So to do this, some of the Piazzolla pieces are slow enough, but one in particular we decided to adjust to allow it to become danceable. Number 3 is marked at a rather exciting tempo at tempo 136. But we decided to slow it down all the way to 111 beats per minute to kind of allow that introspection and to allow for that danceability. And I think that you'll be as pleased as I am with how beautiful it turned out. Now, I want to not just brag about this, I wanted to say how is this useful? How is working with dancers useful to this? Well, in talking to Tony and Anna Maria, and in our own classes, we learned that dancing tango is a very personal thing. There's personal flares that you put in yourself, there's personal things that you listen to in music. In talking to Tony, I asked, what do you listen for as the person who leads Anna Maria in this dance? And he said he listens for the ebb and flow of the piece, the movements of the piece. And he described other circumstances where that can be used. Anna Maria, I asked, well, what do you listen as the follower, as the person who follows the dance? And she said something very interesting. She said she listens to the melody, because the melody informs her how to put her own flair on it, how to put her own style on it. So in conclusion, I wanted to encourage anyone who plays the violin that these pieces are playable, they are wonderful, and they are an important part of the repertoire. Astor Piazzolla is a very important 20th century composer, especially in the classical music industry. He's kind of our liaison into tango music as classical musicians, and I think he deserves a place in that. Tango is a different style. It's very, very different from classical music. But it is popular with audiences. We see that it still holds an international appeal. Piazzolla Piazzolla was surprised to see his music go to Japan, to Western Europe, to every place that he didn't intend it to go. And so it has an international acclaim and an international appeal. Most importantly, tango music has the ability to develop one's own style, one's own voice. This is a challenging thing within the classical music industry because we value such structure and such exactness. We talk about the effect of one note or the other, whereas this has the ability to change how we hear, change how we play, and to make something truly unique. So again, I wanted to restate that this piece does foster individuality, and I would encourage everyone to look into them and to hear them. To end, I'd like to extend a couple of thank yous. First of all, I want to thank my professor, Chris House, for his support. He was the one that actually suggested this project. We were talking, and he mentioned, I'm sure offhandedly, it would be interesting to see if you could have dancers with these, because that would be a fascinating project. And this ballooned into this incredible experience over the last year. So I wanted to thank him for his guidance. I want to thank Professor Lees and Professor Rafferty. They were on my board who approved this project, and I want to thank them for their support. I want to thank Tango de Barrio, and especially Tony and Anna Maria for their help and their support in this. Of course, I would like to thank my parents. This wouldn't be possible without them fostering my love of music at an early age, and even now coming and supporting us here. My lovely wife, Rachel Mocktel, I want to thank her as well. She was my tango partner, my first tango partner. But more importantly, she's been my support in all of this. Finally, I'd like to thank all of you. Thank you so much for coming out and listening to this recital and listening to me talk. It means a lot to have an audience, and even those who are tuning in on the live stream, thank you so much for being here. We'll take a minute just to get things settled, and then we'll begin the performance of Astor Piazzolla's Tango Etudes. One thing I forgot to mention, the program order, because we were discussing this dance, is a little bit different. We're going to be performing 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, and then 4. We determined 5, 3, and 4 were the best for dancing, so we wanted to have something in the middle where the dancers dance and something at the end, so that we can applaud Tony and Anna Maria. So if that's a little confusing, I apologize, but again, we're going to be doing the first 3, 5, and 6, and then conclude with number 4. So, thank you. to join us. It's a tradition in Tango to have a little bit of wine and a little bit of cheese. I have a pregnant wife, so we have no wine. But we do have cheese and crackers, and we'd love you to come join us. It's a little bit of a trek, but we'll have people going there. If you follow the crowd, we'd love to say hello and say thank you so much for coming out. Thank you again.
Yay,
It's good to
bravo.
see you.
Gemma, this way, this way. Hey, what are you? We're this way. Yeah. This is Gemma. And this is my mom.
I'm good. How are you? I'm Where's Kim?
Too many jobs. I'm going to try to pack up this like now. Yeah, why don't you move people back?
Do you have to pack up now?
Am I allowed to leave some equipment here and come back in 20 minutes?
I mean, I'm not really
Another 20?
Neither of us will be there.
Neither of you will be in. Okay. So it sounds like I need backup now.
Ideally,
Okay, sounds good. Just want to make sure. Thank you so much.
love, you're as pretty as these flowers. Can you carry them?
Yes, I just want to make sure that you have time to see it.
I know.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. I tried to keep everything close, so let me turn stuff off and then we'll be good.
Is this your bag down here, Jared?